The senior Chinese agent was at the wheel of the rented 30-foot powerboat, stoically taking them at a fair lick across the blue-green waters away from mainland Bahamas, heading southeast towards the cluster of islands on their map, using GPS as their guide. 007 had never before been to the Bahamas in her career, and when she not on a mission, she might appreciate her surroundings more. But her hindsight was on the job at hand, with no time for sightseeing, although one couldn't help but notice the abundant beauty. She sat on the aft bench seat with Emma and the junior agent. This trio had binoculars strung around their necks. The map was in 007's left hand, smartphone in her right. It tracked their course via an advanced MI6 program more accurate than Google Maps. The horizon was dotted with sun-shimmering islands, while water traffic was sporadic. 007 wondered about the various restricted routes and heavier water lanes. Were they strictly to warn vessels of hidden dangers and changes in depth? There were surely areas of sea which remained out of reach or untravelled, or dictated by tides and rising water. Perhaps an island barely accessible, whereby a container could be hidden until required. Perhaps even a barge could go undetected. If this terrorist Zhao had a plan which was to be executed soon, there was no necessity for a permanent base of operations. A sunken base, perhaps, although such a construct might very well be rendered visible with the technology of today. A storage container was no insignificant thing to transport or hide. The ship itself had not stopped. Maybe an airlift was involved, but the helicopter required for such a task would most probably have been visible on radar or satellite, not to mention the flight plan it would have required. If the container was lowered onto a barge or smaller vessel, then speed would have had to have been matched and wash taken into account, a more hazardous task than an airlift. So what then? Could a container be dropped overboard and retrieved by its recipient? If the contents were secured, an underwater retrieval wasn't impossible. In fact, it would be a better way to conceal the actions from sight. If that were the case, then its destination might be nearer to the drop than 007 had initially thought. Was this a feasible situation? Was a container actually dropped? Maybe something or someone was brought aboard the container ship. 007 took a contemplative sigh and smiled at Emma, who was watching her. "A penny for your thoughts," Emma said, her brown eyes holding 007's. "I was just mulling possibilities," 007 told her. "Oh? Hypothetical situations, that's all." 007 couldn't take her eyes from Emma's. They were captivating and worth exploring, as was the rest of this woman. "Maybe an answer shall present itself, and I will tell you which one was right." Emma nodded, trying to understand as best she could, but unaware of the secret agent's thought processes. She was fascinated by this woman and wanted to learn all she could. The powerboat's engine dropped throttle, and they drifted on inertia. 007 hadn't realised their position. They were only 50 yards from the point where Weilin's locator beacon had first been activated. To the surprise of no one, there wasn't a thing on the water. "OK," 007 said decisively. "Let's go." She consulted the map. "South. Those islands seem nearest." "I concur," the senior Chinese agent agreed. Power was reapplied and the boat performed a slight dogleg arc and beat a choppy path towards the cluster of islands, which broke and revealed tiny islands the nearer they were. Some were nothing more than atolls with no visible access, magnified by their binoculars. A few pleasure craft were at anchorage. 007 noted that those aboard were dressed more for the occasion than they themselves were. In fact, 007 reflected, they could have been more subtle and less obvious as to what they were, but it was too late now. 007 looked through her binoculars intensely. The view was enough to distract from the mission, and not just the beautiful people. The land and water and horizon was breathtaking. Picturesque imagery not out of place in an exotic holiday brochure extolling their virtues. The heat shimmered and wavered and distorted. "What the hell?" Emma explained. Even the junior Chinese agent caught his breath. No sooner had they seen the meagre section of landmass and tall, alien-like pylon Then it was gone. It had been visible for no more than a second. The incongruity of it was startling. All the binoculars were subsequently lowered. The viewers of the freak anomaly questioning if they had actually seen, until they all concurred it had actually been there. What was it? Emma asked, almost superfluously, because nobody could give a true, definitive answer. It was the corner of an island, 007 said, trying to quantify the image they had all witnessed. And a metal antenna, sort of. Which direction? Queried the senior agent, who had been the only one of them not to have witnessed the mysterious appearance. 007 pointed in the direction where they had seen the mysterious island, even though the location and distance was a vague guess, because it was no longer visible to them. She received nods of agreement from the two others who had witnessed it. Then let's take a look, the senior agent said, applying power to the boat. Dr. Shatterhand seethed with barely contained anger. There was only one thing he despised more than stupidity, and that was disloyalty, although it was a very short distance between them. One had to be stupid to be disloyal, especially in his organisation, and either character trait was dealt with swiftly and, in most cases, definitively. The dead ex-employee whose body was on the floor before Shatterhand would have been a prime example of the doctor's justice had the coward not taken his own life. Juan, Shatterhand addressed his longest-serving, most frustrated friend. What do you know about that? Juan thought the boss was talking about the body until he looked at one of the many screens which displayed images from the myriad surveillance cameras dotted throughout the island. A boat approached their invisible island. Juan swiped and touched a control pad tablet which caused the camera to zoom in and the image to be displayed on a largest screen. Without being asked, Juan carried out a log search on the boat and a facial recognition check on all of its occupants. The results were not positive, and Juan reeled off the details to Shatterhand, whose expression remained unchanged. They cannot be allowed to get away, Shatterhand stated. It's too late for any of the so-called intelligence agencies to react to their disappearance before our plan is carried out, so destroy them. Juan didn't argue, despite his own doubts about the time frame and the wisdom of said action. Robinson was sweating by the time he'd finished the lap of the circuit and gratefully accepted the cold bottle of local beer which Bond handed him, beads of melted ice cooling his hand. Have fun? Bond asked. Robinson nodded, then rolled the bottle across his forehead before gulping down its contents, the golden liquid exploding inside him like his first ever drink. At that moment his smartphone vibrated for attention and brought him back to Earth. 007 briefly filled Robinson in on what had thus far transpired, including the shared Mirage experience, and that they were now headed in the approximate direction of the island. Before Robinson was able to reply, a static crackle over the earpiece interrupted him and the line went completely dead. Bloody atmospherics, Robinson muttered. Trouble? Bond queried. No, Robinson replied and tried redialing. Probably just the service around here. He gave up with the phone. 007 is quite a way out to sea. Bond handed his friend another drink. Not a beer this time, but a more hydrating bottled water. Cheers, James. Hungry? Bond asked. Am I ever?